Yeah, I grew up in a real rural area, and you think rural areas are safe, and I'm talking like cow pastures, horse farms, deer hunting, hiking, boating, hunting, fishing, snowmobiling. That's what everybody did where I grew up. Little town of Stillwater, New Jersey. And you know what can happen though is evil can hide in plain sight in places like that. Nobody thinks that there's a predator amongst them until it's too late. And in my case, that predator had a 45-year reign of terror. And you know what predators have to do is they have to win over the community. They have to win over the family, and then they win over the victim. And that's exactly what happened in my case. At 6 years old, I had open heart surgery, Shaun. And yeah, it was 1971. It was a life or death surgery. And I survived it. And my parents were so proud of me for surviving it. They didn't want me to feel different for having a scar now. Little kids, they just want to fit in amongst each other. And so they tried to normalize my scar by having me show it to their friends and collect a quarter from everybody. And one of their friends they had me show it to was my older brother's scoutmaster. And this guy was a lieutenant in the sheriff's department. He's a lieutenant in the sheriff's department. He's a scoutmaster. He's on the historical society of our town. He's leading an Audubon society in our community. He's on the Kiwanis Club. Listen to this. Kiwanis is for the betterment of children in your community. And he's an active member in Kiwanis. He's the chaplain at the American Legion post, saying the prayer to start all the American Legion meetings. So, like I said, they hide in plain sight. This guy was hiding in plain sight. And what he really was a professional hunter of children. And he started grooming me at 6 years old. And it progressed. He took his time. They are methodical. And he took his time. And over the course of the next 4 years, it went from the playbook, of these guys is, they have to initiate touch at some point. They ply you with alcohol. They show you pornography. All those things he did. And he befriended me out of the watchful eye of my parents. Back in the 70s, when you grew up, as soon as you could learn to ride your bike, your parents told you, be gone and be home at dinner time. And I lived in a lake community, so all the young kids went down to the lake, and we fished and skipped rocks, and there was jungle gyms and basketball courts and baseball fields, tennis courts, everything. So that's where everybody hung out down at the lake. And that's where this guy would just come by constantly, spending time with us, teaching us how to fish for hours, inviting me into his truck at 9 years old to have a beer, showing me Polaroid pictures, nude pictures. And it eventually, so this is over the course of years now, and eventually between 10 to 12 is when he essayed me. And I told myself after the final encounter where he did the ultimate betrayal to me, that I would just bury this down deep inside, that I was never going to talk about it, because talking about it to me, my mind said, would be reliving it, and we could just go about our life. And almost immediately, as a 12-year-old kid, I started smoking weed, and then it just progressed to heavy drinking in high school, and my grades being mediocre, and not wanting to get involved in sports. And there's other things, that abuse victims do, like playing with fire, shoplifting. And there were signs, but is it signs of just an adolescent going through puberty and getting into high school and meeting other kids and acting out, or is there an underlying issue there? And for me, my mother worked in the high school where I went to, and I guess all the teachers thought, like, since she works in the high school, if there was a problem, she would know about it. But abuse victims are great at cranking on a smile, or we have those two faces: the face we have behind closed doors, and then the face we show the world. And the face I showed the world was just happy-go-lucky Clark, where the face behind closed doors was racked in pain and shame and guilt and hatred and rage and anger. And that's how I held for myself. I held all the hate for myself until at age 17. As I mentioned, this scoutmaster was my older brother's scoutmaster. And also my next door neighbor, Jeff, who was like a brother to me, he and my brother were joined at the hip. They were best friends. They were in the scouts together. And at 23, Jeff unalived himself. And my brother and I found him next door. And I blamed instantly in my mind, I blamed my abuser, Dennis Pegg. And that's where all my hate and rage and anger shifted from solely to myself to now towards him. And it just built over the years, and I seethed, and it doesn't, Shaun, it doesn't lessen as time goes on. It's like a poison that's eroding every aspect of your being, psychologically, mentally, physically, spiritually. At 12 years old, I was an altar boy in the Episcopal Church. And at 12 years old, I was like, what good is this God thing? Like, why should I be involved in this? And that's, I put a dividing wall up between me and God back then. And, I've heard people equate being SA'd to soul murder. It just kills your soul and it destroys your soul. And that's basically what happened to me. And so now, I graduate high school, I go off to college, and now I'm on my own. And one thing is, I thought by going to college, I would distance myself from the pain and the shame. But until you address it, that pain and shame follows you everywhere. And it carried with me right up to college. It doesn't go away. And I went to college back in the 80s, and I tried, my first rail of white back then, and absolutely loved it. Like, it took away all my insecurities and just made me feel strong and powerful and outgoing, instead of this broken individual I kept inside. And I also met what being SA'd does to a person is it makes it impossible to be intimate. Now, sex and intimacy are two totally different things. Intimacy, you have to be open. And I met the love of my life in college. And after college, she wanted to start our lives and get married and have kids and careers. And a long-term relationship or a long-term career made me feel trapped. And trapped is how I felt at that guy's house. And it's not like I consciously said to myself, if I get into a long-term relationship and get married, I'm going to be trapped. It was just like a complete uncomfortable feeling. The thought of it brought on anxiety, and I couldn't do it. And I told her I can't do it. And I broke her heart, and I walked away. And that haunted me, Shaun, like haunted me my whole life, that animal destroyed my ability to be intimate with the woman I loved. And after college, I am off on, my own devices now. And it just started turning into one addiction after another. When you're holding on to trauma, you become a pleasure seeker. So like you have this trauma that you haven't addressed. You're feeling uncomfortable. You're feeling depressed. You're feeling anxiety, and you seek pleasure to get rid of that feeling instantly. And that's what I did my whole life. I just became a pleasure seeker, whether it was sex, whether it was gambling, whether it was drugs or alcohol. I had no coping skills other than those types of vices. And that's what I did, and just chased those things, chased them my whole life. My 20s were a blur of one night stands and one career after another. Like 2 years would be the max in a job I held. 2 years and out. One night stand. And my mind told me if we sleep with enough women, we'll feel strong and powerful and like a man instead of the weak individual I felt like inside. And man, living like that for that whole decade of my 20s, I went into my 30s like a shell of a man. Just like I hurt so many women in my 20s. They would catch feelings for me. And as soon as they would catch a feeling for me, I'd be, shoo, see ya, I'm out of here. I can't have that, man. You're shaking your head like maybe you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of survivors, man, and it's heartbreaking. I really feel for you. I've got a 2-year-old here, and you just see how innocent a child is. And you described it really well. They are child hunters. They're swallowing people's souls. And once that soul is harvested, it's really hard to put the pieces back together again, because so many people unalive themselves or just fall back on addictions and the things you're describing and end their own, the lives are shortened through that. And I commend your bravery speaking about this. And it's, you've come through it, and you're using it now to inspire other people. And that's the way to transform that dark energy.
Yeah. You can't heal from something you can't talk about. It's impossible. And SA survivors, usually it's one of three things that is waiting for you in life: addiction, death, or healing. And I came close to the second one, death, on numerous times. I definitely hit all the marks on the first one. And by the grace of God, I have a second chance at life, and I'm healing, and I'm trying to help others heal. Just, like when it's male on male essaying, it is just so tough for guys to talk about it. And I'm just trying to pave the way, that if you can just, the toughest thing to do when you've been essayed is to break your silence It's the absolute toughest thing to do. I did a book reading event last night, book reading, book selling, book signing. And I had a girl, man, I couldn't believe people drove from all around the country to be at this event. It was amazing. Like the event was in New Jersey. People came from Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, and somebody even drove all the way from New Mexico. And I Googled how long the drive from New Mexico to New Jersey is, and it's 24 hours. And I was just like, wow, dude, you're committed, man. But this girl from Massachusetts came, and when she came up to get her book signed, she just sobbed and couldn't speak a word to me. And I said, you know, were you essayed? And she just nodded her head. And she couldn't talk to me. And she had somebody with her who said they drove from Massachusetts. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to write my phone number in your book. I signed it for her. I wrote my phone number and I said, call me and we're going to get through this together. So I hope she calls, man. That was last night at 10 o'clock at night. So, but that's the toughest thing to do, is to break your silence. But the most rewarding thing to do is to break your silence.
All right, let me just give a summary for the viewers so far then. We're here with Clark Fredericks. His book is called Scarred, and all of Clark's links are in the description box below this video. He started out giving us his background as a kid, whereby these evil things happened to him, and the guy who did it, you know, was up high up in the Scouts. The guy who did it had interactions with his brother and interactions with his neighbor, and the neighbor's kid unalived himself, and then Clark, it all brought it to the surface, and Clark, who was seething against himself and what had happened, then the energy, the direction of that went towards the perpetrator. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So how old are you at this point of the story now? You're in your 20s, did you say?
Through my 20s, it was the one night stands, the career change constantly. And then I felt like an empty shell at the end of my 20s, and I needed something else to distract me from that uncomfortable feeling. And I found it in gambling. And I went to a casino, and without even knowing really what I was doing with blackjack, I won $1,700. I went back 2 weeks later, won $2,200. But people were like yelling at me at the table because I'm not doing the right thing, and I was just like, ah, you know, but I still won. But everybody's yelling at me. So I'm like, before I go back again, I'm gonna learn everything about blackjack and craps, so I don't get yelled at. And that's what I did. And over the next 6 months, I just practiced cards. And I'm looking at all the comments here. It's just getting distracted.
No, don't pay attention. Just keep talking.
Oh, Jackie read the book and she loved it. I gotta shout out to Jackie. Jackie Gilbert, yeah, baby. So when I went back to the casinos, and this isn't to brag, Shaun, but I had an unbelievable 4-year run in the casinos, just astronomical winning, tens of thousands of dollars constantly. Yes, I lost big sometimes. I'm making $700 in the tire automotive industry a week. And that would be one hand of blackjack I'm betting that. You know, it was insanity. And my biggest win was $153,000. And that was after losing 3 hands of craps where I had 20 to 30,000 on the crap table and lost 3. So I was like over $250,000 for that night. But you know what? It never made me happy. It didn't do anything for me. It was just another outlet, another tool for me to use to live a more decadent lifestyle. like, all right, now I got more money. I can just be, get more vices, get more drugs, just run quicker in life, 24/7. And that's all money did for me, because I wasn't healed, and I didn't respect money back then. And I couldn't wait, like gambling, like any other addiction, you build up a tolerance to it and you need more and more and more and more. Well, I couldn't wait for the weekends to come to go to the casinos. What do I do Monday through Friday when I'm feeling on edge and I got anxiety and I got depression and I'm just feeling uncomfortable? Well, I need action during the week too. So I started sports betting through a local bar who was, aligned with the mob. And they gave me like word about, like I would take buddies down with me from my area to go gamble, for the weekend, all expenses paid. And so they would come back and tell everybody, like, Clark's out of his mind. Like, he won $50,000. I never seen somebody bet like him, or he lost, $50,000. He's insane. And so word spread around. And so when I started sports betting with the mob, they gave me an open limit. So I could bet as much as I wanted, as often as I wanted. There was no cap. And, I started off, $500 a game, just taking it easy. And then, I had some big wins with them, 30, 40,000 a week wins. But then I just started losing and losing and losing and losing. And at one point I had a briefcase in my room with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and chips, like just sitting there, like anybody could have walked in and just grabbed it. I had been like, somebody told me, I was a dopey idiot back then, and somebody had told me, as long as you put in deposit under $10,000 into your checking account, it doesn't notify the IRS. So I'm like, really? Oh, great. So I'm going every week with 9,000, 9,400, 9,600, 9,700, 9,200, thinking I'm slick. And that set off all the bells and whistles to the IRS. And I had an IRS criminal investigation agent come right to my house. I wasn't home, but he left a business, gold embossed business card that said, "Call me immediately, Mr. Fredericks." And they were going to charge me with, money fraud, and did a complete audit on me. And that was a nightmare. And now I'm gambling with the mob. In about 6 months' time, Shaun, is all it took for all my money to be gone. Like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars was gone. And my last week with the mob betting, I was down 20,000. And I called up the number and I said, "Hey, I got to move some money around. Can I roll that 20,000 over to the next week?" And they're like, "For you, anything." So I'm like, cool. So now I'm 20 in the hole going into the next week. And I'm like, all right, I got to win at minimum 20, but I want to keep gambling, so I got to get more. So I started betting like parlays and just doing stupid bets. And at the end of the week, I was 77,000 in debt to the mob. And then Shaun, then I knew I was done. The 20,000, I didn't know I was done, but the 77, I knew I was done. And then my life just turned to crap, bro. I had to call that number up and say, "Look, man, I'm tapped out. I don't have any money for you guys." And I tried to set up a payment plan with them. I wasn't trying to run. And the only way I knew to resolve it was to make a monthly payment. And they laughed at that. They said that doesn't. I wanted to pay them $500 a month. And they're like, "Are you insane?" That doesn't even cover the juice. Oh, man. And they started threatening my life. And I got daily calls, sometimes multiple calls a week. And this went on for months. And I just said, look, I'm not going to the authorities. I'm not running. I want to make good by you guys. The only way I know how to make good is to pay a monthly payment. This is all I can do. And they just weren't having it. And the last phone call I got from them after months and months and months and months and months of these calls every day was, you're a dead man. They didn't ask for money. They just said, you're a dead man, and click. And you know what they wanted me to do that whole time, Shaun? You'll love this. Is they were big on me robbing a bank. They're like, dude, we're going to kill you if you don't get us money. You got to go rob a bank. If you get caught, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. That's a lot better than what we're going to do to you if you don't pay us. Go rob a bank. Maybe you get away with it and it can pay us. That's constantly on me to go rob a bank. And I never entertained the thought of robbing a bank, So that last phone call came, and then a couple months went by. Maybe I can't remember. Like 2 months maybe. And I'm at my business. My brother and I had 2 businesses. I happened to stop into my brother's store. We're in the tire automotive business. And his office manager yells to the back office where I'm talking with my brother. He's like, hey, you got to call on line 1. And I'm like, who the hell would call me over here? He goes, I don't know. So I pick up the phone, and a guy introduces himself as a special agent with the FBI. And I'm like, and what can I do for you? He's like, I need to have a conversation with you, Mr. Fredericks. I'm going to be at your Newton location. That's where the other store was, in Newton. He goes, I'm going to be at your Newton location on Thursday at 3:00, and I suggest you be there. And I'm like, whoa. You got to tell me what this is about. And he's like, no, I don't. I'll see you then. Click. For whatever reason, because it had been 2 months since that last phone call, I wasn't even thinking of those guys or related to them. I thought it was something to do with drugs. And the guy shows up, and he's obviously an FBI guy. He gives me a card, and he tells me they have a confidential informant inside one of the major crime families, and that informant relayed that a hit had been put out on my life for my gambling debt. And that's tough. That's tough. And they wanted me to wear a wire. Like, the FBI wanted me to wire up and try to take these guys down. And I said, are you out of your cotton picking mind? Like, there is no way I'm wearing a wire. Like, it's not going to happen. And I said to them this same thing I said to the mob guys. I'm like, this is my problem, and I'm going to try to solve it like a man. I'm not going to wear a wire on these guys. And the FBI guy's like, well, that's very noble of you, but when things get too heavy, here's my card, and you can give me a call, and we'll come help you. I was like, yeah. And it wasn't that I was trying to be a tough guy. It was just I don't know, maybe it was from being abused. You're so beaten down anyway. You get to the point of whatever, dude, whatever's going to happen, whatever, you don't know what happened in my childhood. So these guys are going to take me out. All right. So they take me out. They end my pain. It was sort of that mentality. And I lived on edge, Shaun. I had a shotgun in my pickup, loaded shotgun that I drove around with. I had a baseball bat in my office. I had to look out all the windows of my house every morning before leaving the house. Leaving my office, I'm always scanning everywhere. And I lived that way for a long while. And then nothing ever happened. And it just eventually went away. I don't know what happened to the mob. there's probably one of three things: that they got busted, they got killed, or the guy running the boiler room for gambling was taking my money and not turning it into the bosses. If they have a heavy hitter, they got to figure like they're going to win eventually. Why should we turn this money into the bosses? They might have been pocketing themselves, and they're not hired killers. The boss has the hired killers. They can't go to the boss because they were skimming. They would get killed. So it's one of those three things. So I don't know what happened, bro. But it was those were like the worst years of my life. Like that whole gambling phase just eroded my soul, man. Just like I already had this hole in my soul. Now it's just like shredded, man. Did you ever get into the gambling bug?
Fortunately not. Well, I mean, you call the stock market gambling, but not like, I mean, Wild Man, any amount of money he had, he'd just go straight to the casino and he'd have no money by the end of the day. Yeah.
So that's, that was my like 30s, like to like 35, 36. And then I didn't know, that victims of SA have PTSD. I've learned that later on. But in my 40s, I fell into a huge depression. Like I didn't know like how to handle it. So, just getting out of bed every morning to go to work was like climbing Mount Everest. It was just so exhausting, bro. Like to get up out of bed and go to work. So instead of pouring coffee in my coffee mug, I started pouring in vodka and OJ or white wine and champagne spritzers, like to go to work. And I did that for a while. And then I'd be so exhausted at work, like just unable to do the simplest tasks. So then my mind told me like, hey, that white stuff we loved back in our early days in college, maybe we could just do a little of that throughout the day to give us energy. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a great idea, So, a couple bumps here and there turn into more bumps and then more bumps. And then you're doing it every day. And then it just becomes a monster, bro. And I hurt my back doing tire automotive work. And I went to a doctor and he prescribed me pain pills. And I got hooked on them, like they made me feel like I was 17 again, like I could just work like an animal. And so I'm doing the pain pills. I'm doing the white. I'm drinking heavily. And this is how I'm living for a couple of years. And I'm living this way. And around 45, I'm in a deli getting a coffee. And the front door opens and I look up and it's my abuser.
No.
Yeah. And he comes walking in. Now, I had seen him around town. We're talking 3 decades. But it had been at least 10 years since I'd seen him. But what was different this time is he had a young boy with him. And that young boy, Dennis used to have a nickname that he wanted me to call him. And I heard that young boy calling him that nickname. And that was it, Shaun. Like I had buried all that garbage from my youth and it just ripped it wide open. And I ran out of it. He yelled out to me, "Hey, Clark, like we're best friends, dude. Like you destroyed my life, bro. And you're calling to me like we're best friends." And people always reach out to me and they say they want to go confront their abuser. And I say, don't do it, because these people are evil. and they can never let that mask down, you're not going to get a I'm sorry from them. You're not going to get an apology. You're just going to get re-tormented because they won't apologize. And so here's my guy, like, hey, Clark, like really? And I ran out of there. We shoulder bumped. I got in my truck, Shaun. I sped down the highway. I was cursing. I was punching my steering wheel. I was spitting in my truck, and my life collapsed. I'm already carrying this deep depression that I'm using various substances to overcome. And after like 3-4 weeks after seeing him, I couldn't go to work anymore. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do it. And I walked out of the family business. I was in business with my brother, and we had a blow up, and I walked away, and that was it, man. And now, Shaun, now the worst thing is to have free time on your hands. So I got my trauma that's been ripped open. I got my abuser, Dennis Pegg, in the forefront of my mind, and I'm using substances. And I don't know what to do with my trauma that's ripped open and Dennis Pegg in my mind. So I just dove headfirst, Shaun, into drugs and alcohol. I had no coping skills. And, you know, I'm sure you've had people on, you know, who've abused substances. Like, my substance use went through the roof. You know, I'm buying ounces of white a week. And one thing that happened from being SA'd early on is you get your boundaries stripped from you. And boundaries, like, we all set boundaries for how we want to live our life. I could no longer live within my boundaries. So no matter what boundary I set for myself, it was meaningless. And, you know, one of those boundaries was I will never, ever, ever do H. So we got white and we got H. And I told myself, you know, the homeless people are the ones that do that. You know, the people on Skid Row or Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia or the streets of New York. Drugs lie to you. You know, they lie to you and they invite you in. And it doesn't matter if you're homeless, if you're a movie star, a rock star, a rap star, or a guy in the tire automotive business. You know, it's going to have the same effect on you. And when pain pills ran out and I couldn't find any, I dove into H, man, and started doing that. And I lived this way for a short period of time, and I couldn't shake seeing that young boy with him in that deli. And I wondered what part of the grooming process that young boy was at. Was he almost ready to be SA'd, or was he being shown pornography, or was he giving them beer and teaching them how to fish? And I just 24/7, that kid's on my mind. And one night I had a buddy over to my house, and I had run into somebody earlier in the day who I had a business falling out with. And I hadn't seen the guy since we had that falling out. And I told my buddy about running into this guy. And my buddy said to me, that guy's got to be number one on your X list. And before I could stop the words coming out of my mouth, I said, actually, he's number 2. The piece of garbage who SA'd me as a kid is number 1. And that's the first time in my life I've ever let those words out, ever. And within 15 minutes, we're in my buddy's van driving to go confront this guy. I haven't been back to that house, Shaun, in 30 years. since the last encounter I had with him. And we parked, his house, you'll love this part. His house sat on a little knoll right above the elementary school in Stillwater. Yeah. And I played, little league baseball as a kid. And guess who would be down at every game we had? There's a fence around it, and he'd be on the fence and cheering all of us on. And then he'd come around the fence and pat us all on the back and say, good job. And that's where his house was, sat right above the elementary school. And we park halfway up his driveway, run up his driveway. It's a summer night. His front door is open. His screen door is shut. And I look in, and there he is. I didn't even know if he still lived there. It's been 30 years. And he was there. And I start going into a panic attack. I haven't been back to that house since the last encounter. Were you going to say something?
No, I'm just trying to, I'm feeling what you're going through, man.
Yeah. And, and when he would touch me, I would stiffen like a board. I couldn't move my muscles. It was like paralysis would come over. And I felt that paralysis coming over me as I stared at him sitting in his living room. And before I could completely freeze, I walked up to his front door and ripped his screen door open. And here it is, 9:30 at night. A childhood victim of yours is standing in your doorway. And he calmly, as can be, looks over his shoulder and goes, hey, how are you? And Shaun, that just did me in. Somebody asked, what if he had gotten on his hands and knees and started praying I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. I go, what happened next? How could I do what happened next if he's doing that? But that's what I say. A predator will never let that mask down. Ever, dude. They simply can't do it. And here this guy just nonchalantly, he's like, hey, how are you? That set me over the edge. I go, hey, how am I? Let me show you how I am. And that face that I kept behind closed doors for 30 years that nobody saw, I let out, Shaun. He saw that face he created. He saw the pain. He saw the rage. He saw the hurt. He saw the anger. And we got into a violent, bloody fight. And at the end of it, he was unalived. And people want to know, because all victims have that feeling of wanting to do that. The pain they carry is so intense that that's where their mind goes to even the score. And my answer to everybody who says, did that solve all your problems? No. Doing that did not solve my problems. What I did, Shaun, was stop a monster from ever being able to hurt another kid.
Clark, how long did the altercation last?
It wasn't long, bro. It was maybe 3-4 minutes, probably. And in the course of that, I put a knife right through my hand, severed all the ligaments and tendons in my hand. So my hand was like that. I couldn't use it because all the bands were severed in there. But I was so full of adrenaline and other things that it didn't really hurt that bad at the time. And my last words to him, see if I can do this without, ruining your show for you, is he slipped in blood. He fell down. He was up against a wall. He was seriously wounded. And I got down eye level with him, and I looked him in the eye, and I said, "It's not so fun essaying little boys now, is it?" And I ended him. And I like to tell everybody, you don't heal from trauma by adding more trauma. It doesn't work. Like, and Shaun, like, everybody carelessly throws out, like, every parent out there carelessly throws out, if that ever happened to my kid, I would off them. Well, let me tell you, offing somebody hurts your soul, man. It hurts your psyche. It hurts your being. It's not healthy for you. You know, it's not good, man. And
yeah. Did anyone witness this, Clark, or see you going in and out?
My buddy was with me. He was in the doorway.
So he saw the whole thing?
He saw the whole thing.
And what was he doing while the altercation was going on for 3 or 4 minutes?
Standing there with his mouth open, you know, like aghast. One thing I did at the end, is we'll leave a little teaser for your audience. But the police were baffled at the crime scene. Nothing was taken from the house. Obviously, this wasn't a robbery. But they were baffled why a set of bloody footprints went to the doorway of his bedroom. And this detective that I became friends with, who was the crime scene investigator, we hooked up after prison. And he asked me that. He goes, that part baffles me. Why? And you get the book, and it's very poignant why I walked bloody footprints to the edge of that guy's bedroom. Get the book, and you can find out why. You know, a little teaser.
I'm putting the link to your book in the live chat, and the link to book is also in the description box if you're watching this on replay. Clark, could you describe your departure from the scene?
My buddy and I hopped in his van. I drove. And, you know, like, I literally blood, I had a glove on, and blood is just gushing out of the glove. And I'm just saying to my buddy on the drive home, like, man, dude, like, my hand is messed up, bro. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, man. And he was like, bro, I just want to get home to my daughter. He's like, I just want to get home to my daughter. I'm like, well, let's get back to my house and let's, you know, like, formulate a plan here, man. And I only lived a couple miles from this guy's house. So it was literally like less than a 5-minute drive. And we got home, and I'm like, I gotta go get some paper towels. I'll be right back. And I went in for paper towels, and through the kitchen window, I saw him backing down my driveway, and he was off. And I was left to my own devices. And, you know, we have a saying here, maybe you say it over there too, in the States here, duct tape fixes everything. So I got paper towels and duct tape, and duct taped my hand. And that's how I treated it. And I was arrested the next day. And it's a whole scenario of how that came out with a family member requesting a well-being check on that guy, thinking maybe they could save me from life in prison if they could get to him while he was still alive. And I woke up the next morning, and I went out to pour a glass of wine to try to, like, formulate a plan, what I was going to do. And my house was surrounded by state police. There had to be 15 to 20 troopers out there, detectives from the prosecutor's office. They all had their guns out. They were hiding behind trees, rock walls, my shed. And I was ordered on a bullhorn to come out of the house with my hands up. And I chugged that glass of wine. I poured another glass. And Shaun, maybe you'll find some humor in this, but I had a high school friend who's a state trooper. And I saw him at a bar maybe 2 months before this happened. And he's like, hey, man, come out to my car. I got some state police hats and shirts. He goes, take some. I was like, all right, cool, bro. So I took some shirts and a hat. And when the state police ordered me out of my house over the bullhorn, I went into my bedroom and I put my state police shirt on. I'm like, this should get me out of this. They'll see I'm one of them and let me go.
Clark, let me just pause you.
Yeah.
All right. So, obviously this happened, and you've given an important message to the public about the morality of not doing things like that. What I'm interested in is, in the moment and going throughout that night before you got arrested, the psychological waves you were going through, because not many people have been through the things you've just described. So I'm imagining, you come home, you've got your mate with you, and you're having this conversation in the car, and he takes off, but you're just on this huge adrenaline spike, and you're cleaning yourself up. You've probably got a million things going through your head. Could you just take us through what that evening was like for you psychologically? Did you manage to get to sleep, for example?
I did so much more white when I got home, like enough to kill an elephant. And maybe that's what I was trying to do. And maybe that next day, that's what I would have decided my only option was to take myself out. I knew the damage to my hand was going to be my downfall. Like you just can't walk into a hospital and be like, I stuck a hunting knife through my hand, and they'd be like, how'd you do that? And I just knew like that was going to be it. And
did you also, in between those thoughts though, think that about the possibility of getting away with it?
Maybe the next morning when I woke up I'll get to that in a second. But that night I just felt like I'm really, really screwed here, Shaun. Like I saw one of my buddies at a liquor store on my way home that night to meet my friend. And my buddy could tell, I was like pretty amped up. And he said, just get home and be safe. And if you need me later, give me a call. And I called him and I said, hey man, get over here. And he said, I'll be right there. And that was it on the phone call. And then the girl I was dating, I called her and I said, come over here. I need to see you. And I told both of them that I took care of a situation that needed to be taken care of, and that I just flushed the rest of my life away, and that my life was now over, and I just wanted to say goodbye to them. And my mother had just come up from Florida, Shaun. She had just arrived 2 days prior. And I sent my buddy up to go wake my mother up to bring her down. And I couldn't even tell her. I told her what I did. And she just was like, why, Clark? Why? Why would you? Why you? Why would you do that? And I couldn't tell her that I was one of his victims. I couldn't say the words to my mother even then. With my life being over, I said, I righted a wrong for my brother Jay, for Jeff, and for a whole hell of a lot of other kids in this town, Mom. And she goes, but why are you the person to right the wrong? I don't get it. Why? And I couldn't say because I was one of the victims too. I couldn't tell her that night. And so that was where I was. I said goodbye to my girlfriend, bye to my buddy. And I took a bunch of Xanax and I chugged a Kettle One bottle and went to bed with my hand wrapped in duct tape. And my mother stayed up cleaning up all the blood. And my mother wanted to go on the run with me. She told my sister, she called my sister in the early morning hours and told her what she thought I had done. And my sister was like, what are we going to do? And my mother said, I'm going to go on the run with him. She wanted to go all Bonnie and Clyde, bro. And my sister said, Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Are you out of your mind? You can't take him on the run. Where are you going to go? And she goes, we're going to go to Florida and hide out there. Like, just like one of these old school moms, like, you're not taking my son, God bless her, bro. And I didn't know this. I only found this out later on, but this was the conversation my sister and her were having. And my sister's like, Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You can't get involved in this. You're 80 years old. You want to go sit in prison? Like, really? And she's like, no cops. Don't you call the cops. And so my sister ended up calling in a well-being check. And, everybody's loving my mom right now. It's a riot. My sister thought I would hate her for the rest of my life. And to be honest, at the time, Shaun, when something doesn't go the way we want it to go, we can't see the silver lining at the time. But had my sister not done what she did, that next morning, bro, it wasn't going to be good for me. It was, bro, I probably would have taken myself out, man. I wasn't going to go do life in prison. Why? So I got arrested the next day. And at the state police barracks, the lieutenant who ran the crime scene unit, who was at the house and did the investigation, he showed up at the barracks. And cops, for the last, few years have gotten a bad rap. But this guy was a straight shooter. And with everything going in society now, people are polarized, like with politics, it's just out of control how people get one-sided with politics and their views.